Hello VC, Michael, Clash City Rocker, with a video on 90s bands, particularly the two genres that get lumped in together, grunge and Britpop. And granted, I know that a number of the bands that are identified as Britpop bands hate the term and grunge bands hate the term grunge. But nonetheless, I want to talk about 90s bands, particularly what I classify as melodic hard rock bands from the 90s in America, and then more pop rock bands from England in the 90s as well. But before I begin, thanks to those who have subscribed, thanks for those who have viewed. Although I may have done one too many 80s videos, I'm starting to lose a few viewers. But today, I want to talk about grunge versus Britpop. And the reason I'm doing it is because of this band. You all know this band. This band is currently winding its way through North America. Started their so-called reunion tour in, I believe, Wales maybe, and then was in the UK after a protracted breakup between the two main Oasises, Liam and Noel. So this is a single. This is an original 1997. This is Do You Know What I Mean, which is a classic Oasis track. This is on their third album, or fourth if you counted the master plan, Be Here Now. I bought this single the first time I went to England in 1997. I bought the CD single. I wasn't buying vinyl at the time. And at that point, I was thoroughly enthralled with all things British band-wise. It began probably in the Smiths in the late 80s and continued into Stone Roses and then the Laws and then particularly Suede. And I was completely besotted with English bands, English rock bands, electronic English rock bands. It didn't matter. I was buying everything that I possibly could. And a number of those bands that I'm going to talk about today are my favorites. Also at this time in America were a bunch of alternative, indie, punk rock, whatever you want to call them, hard rock bands that got their start, like I did, in the punk clubs in the 80s. And this is obviously Nirvana. This is the last album. This is Unplugged, where they proved that they didn't need amplification, or at least that's what people were saying. But it was a focus on the songs, and the songs are incredible. And tragically, we all know what happened to Kurt Cobain and subsequently the band. But for a while there was this competition between bands in the United States and in the UK. And what I've noticed from watching a number of VC videos over the last few weeks when Oasis announced their tour is a lot of American VC content creators don't like Oasis and don't like English bands. Or if they do, they have a minimal interest and a minimal understanding of the genre. The most famous being when Rob Walker, when he was doing his vinyl tags, asked people to identify Manchester bands or a band from Manchester, and people from the States couldn't identify any bands, which I found just like flabbergasting. I don't know how that's even possible. But anyways, people in America who post VC content often have a very minimal understanding of the band Oasis, and they may know a couple songs, Champagne Supernova, Live Forever, and of course Wonderwall, but they don't really get the deep catalog. In fact, if they've listened to anything beyond What's the Story, Morning Glory, and Definitely Maybe, I don't think they've ever listened to any of the albums after that. So anyways, the main bands in England at the time were, of course, Oasis. I loved Oasis from the beginning. Were they derivative? Potentially. They were just, in my opinion, mining that wealth of English great bands, the Kinks, the Who, the Beatles, of course, and a number of the other bands. But my absolute favorite of the 90s English bands was Blur. This is their Wembley concert from, I think, 2024. I recently saw the movie at a local film festival, documentary about the album, The Ballad of Darren, and of these two concerts. Absolutely mind-blowing. I love this compilation. It's a live record. but it's kind of like a greatest hits because the best of Blur is incredibly cost prohibitive. So Blur were easily my favorite of the 90s English pop rock bands, followed by this band, Oasis. Now, what I found interesting was that this was a record store release. This is a best of, but it was impossible to find in the States. And I was one of those queuing up ahead of time to get this copy. I got to my local a little bit before 4. They opened at 7. And when I went in, the owner said they had one copy and it went to the person, and good for them, who was first in line. So I ordered my copy from Europe. Yeah, I know it was re-released, but I wanted a record store day. And this gives an indication of the depth of their catalog. Now, it's only the singles, of course, but there's some great tracks on here. And again, if you don't know later era Oasis, this is well worth picking up, well worth listening to. And then the third band from the 90s that I absolutely loved was Pulp. This record is particularly poignant for me. This album, I bought it the day that I was going through a major life event. This is hardcore, and there's a line in here where Jarvis Cocker says, I'm not Jesus, but I have the same initials. I'm 33. I'm the man who does the dishes. I kind of like summarized my life. Never saw Blur, or never saw Pulp. Have seen Oasis. They played local theater I was working at the time. In fact, their live album from 1999, Familiar to Millions, I think it's called, was recorded in my local venue. I saw Blur on the Blur tour in 97 a couple times, but I've never seen Pulp. Love to. But probably my favorite of the 90s English bands is this one. Suede, or as we call it in the US, London Suede. And although I didn't get the Oasis box set on Record Store Day, I did get the one copy of this, Sci-Fi Lullabies Volume 2, which was available on that day. So for me, and I've always been, obviously, and those who watch my 80s videos, loving of English pop bands, English rock bands, 60s and 70s and 80s. But the 90s just continued that for me. Again, Oasis, Pulp, Blur, favorite bands then, favorite bands now. Now, American 90 bands, of course, Nirvana, great. I worked one of their shows, I think on the Bleach, when they were still in a band. Chad Channing was the drummer, played a little punk rock club where I was doing PA, or setting up the PA. Thought they were a great band, didn't really think about them. Obviously, Nevermind blew up. I have a connection with the producer of that record. Again, those bands started in the punk world, the alternative world, which was the world I was working in the 80s. Another one of the bands from that era, Pearl Jam. This is Live on Two Legs. This is a concert live album from, I believe, 98, 99. One of the tracks was from Alpine Valley, another theater I was working at the time. I really, really liked the first 3 Pearl Jam records. To me, they were just a great hard rock band, an amazing live band. I know that they're still continuing. I have a lot of friends who are huge Pearl Jam fans, like the band, like the people in the band. Another of those bands was huge, Soundgarden, Super Unknown. What I find interesting about this one is their first record that I had was Louder Than Love, and then I did a show of theirs where they were opening for Skid Row on the Skid Row No Frills tour, which was very interesting. I thought they just blew Skid Row out of the water. But Soundgarden at this time, particularly the songs Black Hole Sun and Spoon Man, became more pop-oriented, and a lot of people who didn't like hard rock music were starting to get into this band, etc. And then my favorite of them all was Alice in Chains. Jerry Cantrell, an amazing guitar player, Lane Staley, probably one of the greatest vocalists of all time. This record, Rooster in particular, once you've heard it, it stays with you forever. So I had that duality of sorts, and if you're in my music room, which I'm in right now, I listen to a little bit of everything. For me, it's like I love all those bands. They were different genres, different type of music. If I wanted something a little more aggressive, I would listen to the American bands. If I wanted something more, you know, pop-oriented and classic Beatles, Kinks, Who vein, I'd listen to the English 90s bands. There were other great bands from America at that time. Obviously, Stone Temple Pilots. You say whatever you want. I don't even know how I got this record. It's a Walmart exclusive. I must have found it in my local. Unfortunately, people have a tendency to steal records from Target and Walmart, and then they end up in your local. I guess I don't have any ethical values because I bought it, but Scott Weiland, an incredible vocalist. Other bands in that vein, we'll go through them quickly. Smashing Pumpkins. This is another one produced by Butch Vig, who did, everyone knows, Nevermind. Again, Butch Vig is a Wisconsin guy. By the way, I love Billy Corgan's new show where he's interviewing people. This is great. Love this soundtrack. This is a good movie. Singles, Cameron Crowe. A lot of those bands are on it. And then another great compilation of 90s American bands is this. Demon Records has to be my new favorite label. And this is an amazing compilation. And it has Sonic Youth, Bikini Kill, Mudhoney, Husker Du, Sleater-Kinney, Dinosaur Jr., Sugar, R.E.M. Soundgarden, Flaming Lips, Replacements, Screaming Trees, Pixies, Belly, Babes in Toyland, Melvins, Meat Puppets, Pavement, Amps, Campervan, Beethoven, Throwing Muses, Buffalo Tom, and Temple of the Dog. Again, great. Many of those are the 90s bands that we identify as grunge. And then again, Lane Staley, I think, is my favorite vocalist. I just love his voice. Mad Season was a kind of a one-off group he did with Mike McCready from Pearl Jam. And then Chris Cornell, another one who has to be up there, the greatest vocalist of all time. Audio Slave with the gentleman from Rage. Love this band. Thought they were great. And again, probably anything that Chris Cornell sings on is going to be amazing. But I also love this. Velvet Revolver. Scott Weiland and the boys from Guns N' Roses. It's an incredible hard rock album. Unbelievable. Tragically, and again, we could talk about it. We have, you know, Scott Weiland here. Chris Cornell here. Lane Staley here. Kurt Cobain there. And you all know what the equation is. They're no longer with us. And yeah, drugs have always been a big part of the music scene. I'm well aware of it. I've been part of it, particularly in the 80s and 90s. But it's tragic and it's sad because we've lost great musicians, and I'm sure their friends and family are hit the most. But anyways, if I had to vote, I would vote for the 90s English bands. For example, this compilation, I think they recorded this in a day. The Help one for the Bulgarian, what was it? War Child for the Landmines. Great compilation. Again, there's not too many. There's a box set. I think it's called Live Forever by Rhino, but there's not too many 90s English pop or rock compilations. This is a great one. Oasis is on here. Boo Radley, Stone Roses, Radiohead, Orbital, Portishead, Massive Attack, another one of my all-time favorite bands. Suede, Charlatans with the Chemical Brothers, Stereo MCs, Sinead, The Levelers, Manic Street Preachers, another one of my all-time favorite bands. Terror Vision, and then a bunch of groups that come together, including Blur. And then another Demon record, one that I picked up a few last year. Great compilation. A lot of the 90s English pop bands. So I see in the VC a big, you know, a huge love of grunge, 90s American bands. I don't think we as Americans, and I'm generalizing, and I'm sure I can get a lot of pushback, truly understand the depth and the greatness that existed in 90s UK, England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, of bands that existed. Again, I didn't show all of the ones that I brought out this morning, but there were others, some that got their start before that Britpop term came about. Primal Scream. I just picked this one up the other day. This is fun, a little promo singles collection. This is one of the few actual original 90s records I have. Elastica. I saw them with Sonic Youth and Kim Deal's band The Amps. It was such a great show. Happy Mondays, or Black Grape. Love Sean Ryder and this band, one of the greatest funky tracks of all time. Happy Mondays. Stone Roses, again, got their start before Britpop. But the reason I ultimately, as I end this video, go for the 90s English bands the most is they're still recording great records. Here's the Ballad of Darren, Blur, Pulp, More, which just came out last week. And then a new Suede album just came out this week as well, Antidepressants. So these bands are still relevant, still recording brilliant records. And hopefully Oasis will as well. So just want to start the conversation. 90s England, 90s America. What do you prefer? Let me know. Michael, Clash City Rocker. Go Brewers. Cheers.